Communication, also known as AAC. My name is Kayla McAllister. We do have a wonderful team of inclusion professionals monitoring our chat box today who are available to answer your questions. If you do have a question that relates to your specific service though, your own IP would be the best person to ask because they understand your full context. And if you do have a question about a specific child, then their speech pathologist would be the best person to speak to because they are the experts in supporting that child with their goals. We have a diverse range of people joining us today from a variety of settings, so please do give a shout out in the chat box and tell us where you're from. We would love to know. We have a little bit of a lag here on the screen. There we go. So Namani, I have just said, are you all good? In the oldest living language on the planet, the language of the land I'm speaking to you today from, the Kaurna language of the Adelaide Plains. Nai Nari Kayla Gartanya McAllister. My name is Kayla McAllister and I'll be talking to you today about supporting children with complex communication needs. Gartanya is a Kaurna name meaning that I'm the firstborn female in my family, and this name has been gifted to me by my Nyakantalia, my dearest brother, Gawanu Tamaru, or Uncle Tamaru. He is an emerging Kaurna elder and Aboriginal consultant here at AAC. I'm very grateful that Gawanu Tamaru chooses to walk beside me, guide me, and teach me about Kaurna language, history, and culture. At AAC, we're also very fortunate to be guided by Awa Eddie Peters, a Zenith Kes elder from the Torres Strait Islands. And he has advised us to use the term Zenith Kes rather than Torres Strait Islander. So this is the term that I'll be using today. Now, usually before I would say an acknowledgement of country, I would ask if there's a Kaurna person who would like to say a welcome to country, or another Aboriginal or Zenith Kes person here today who'd like to say an acknowledgement of country before I do. However, unfortunately, the format of the webinar does not allow participants to speak. So I will only be able to share my acknowledgement of country, and I do apologise for this shortcoming in the format that we're working in today. As I said, I'm very lucky to work with Gawanu Tamaru, who's teaching me Kaurna Warra or Kaurna language, and I feel really proud to learn to speak this language, which is both ancient and thriving in the modern world. Gawanu knows that I will make mistakes and that mistakes are a part of my learning, and I'm grateful for his guidance as I continue to learn and grow. So with Gawanu's permission and encouragement, I'd like to say an acknowledgement of country in Kaurna. Mani Nabudni Bam Bambalia, Kaurna Mirana Nadlu, Kaurna Yata Tampinthi, Yankchu Mirana Nadlu, Natalia. So what I've just said is, it's good that you all came today. Kaurna people I acknowledge, Kaurna country I recognise, other Aboriginal people and Zenith Kes people I acknowledge with my respect. A little bit about me. This topic of supporting children with complex communication needs is something that I'm very passionate about, and I hope to ignite some of that passion in you over this session. I have a Bachelor of Early Childhood Education, and I've worked across a wide variety of settings, including long daycare, Department for Education kindergartens, primary school disability unit teaching, and mainstream junior primary teaching. And I'm now an inclusion professional with AAC. What I am not is a speech pathologist or allied health professional. So the information included in this webinar is for general educational purposes only and does not constitute advice regarding strategies to support specific children. While I have done my best to thoroughly research everything that we'll talk about today, there is always a chance that something I might say could be incorrect. So a child's family, speech pathologist, and medical and allied health team are the experts in their needs and the best supports for them. So please do seek them out to discuss each child's unique situation. So I have been working with children with complex communication needs for 13 years. 30% of those children also had a vision impairment, which adds another layer of complexity to using visual communication methods. I spent many years teaching in a disability unit where all of my students were pod users, which is a communication system that we'll be speaking a bit more about today. I've spent a lot of time developing curriculum and assessment tools for children with complex communication needs because there's really not much out there. So I found the need to have to design a lot of those myself for my students. And that led me into doing lots of training and mentoring for educators in communication support and curriculum access for children with complex communication needs, which is what I'm very passionate about. And I have spent lots and lots of time making visual resources. The layout of the session today, we will be having a 1 hour session. I have tried to squeeze in as much as possible to this hour. It is being recorded so you can go back and rewatch. I may be going quite quickly, but that's because there is a lot of content that I know people really want to know, so that they can feel confident supporting children with their communication devices. So we are recording it. It will be up on our website for you to rewatch later if you'd like to go back and take any further notes. As I said, feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. We have other IPs monitoring this. We do have a separate session which we ran last week on understanding complex communication needs, which is sort of an introduction to complex communication needs. You'll be able to access this via the Inclusion Agency website shortly. If you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend you check it out, as in that video we discussed the foundational knowledge that this session builds on. However, if you haven't seen that session yet, don't worry. There's still a lot that I think you'll get out of this session. We will whip through a few different forms of, I'm going ahead of myself. We will whip through a few different forms of AAC at the start of this session. If you would like more information on those, you can find that in the Understanding Complex Communication Needs video that I just mentioned. That is going up on our website. We'll be spending the rest of the session talking more in depth about specific strategies that are helpful in supporting children's use of AAC systems. So that will support you to feel more confident using their communication systems with them. So what you will learn today is the rights of children with complex communication needs, different types of augmentative and alternative communication, also known as AAC. We'll be talking about best practice in using AAC systems and strategies for supporting children's use of AAC in our environments. What you won't learn is different types of communication needs. We have gone into that in detail in our first session, Understanding Complex Communication Needs. We won't be learning how to teach children to speak. That's not the goal. And unfortunately, we won't be learning how to remove all of the barriers that society and bureaucratic systems place in front of people with complex communication needs, but we can try our very best. I really like this quote that's about to pop up on the screen here from Maya Angelou, who's an American civil rights activist and poet. This session might bring up some things for you. And in reflecting, you might wish that you could change some of the things that you have done in the past about how you supported children with complex communication needs. I really encourage you to take this quote to heart. You do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. So check in with your own feelings. It's okay not to know. And we all do the best we can with the knowledge we have at the time. Trust me, I've made every mistake in the book at least once. As long as we're always continuing to learn more, and then change our practice when we learn more, that's all we can ask. So just know that you have done your best for the children and families you supported, just as you'll continue to do your best with whatever knowledge you might gain from this session. I'll also be touching on some sensitive topics, such as premature birth and birth injury. So please do look after yourself and take a break if needed. I'll also in this session be using the term autistic children rather than children with autism. This is because there's been quite a lot of talk within the autistic community, and many people prefer for us to use the term autistic children because they feel that autism is part of their identity. It's not a condition that they have. They're not people with autism. They say, I am autistic. That's part of my identity. So I've chosen to go with that identity language today. So what are complex communication needs? Complex communication needs refers to the needs of people who have difficulty using speech or having their speech and communication understood by others. This can be all of the time or some of the time. So for example, someone who might have difficulty speaking some of the time could be an autistic child who's experiencing sensory overload. They might not be able to speak clearly during those moments. Also, some people who have a brain injury find it really difficult to speak when they're in a heightened emotional state. Non-speaking is the preferred term rather than non-verbal, because non-speaking people can still make vocalizations, and vocalizations are a form of verbal communication. The term non-verbal also implies that a person doesn't have language in their mind, which is certainly not the case. They definitely have lots of thoughts and ideas that they would like to share with people. And many children who've previously been labelled as non-verbal do actually have a few words or signs that they use. And so complex communication needs is a term that better reflects their needs and challenges. However, complex communication needs is the ideal term because it covers everyone who might have extra needs regarding their communication. So we're not going to go through all of these types of complex communication needs. As I said, we covered that last week in our session on understanding complex communication needs. So if you'd like more information on this, please do go back and watch that video. But just a quick run through. You may have children at your service now or previously who have some of these conditions or needs that are up on the screen right now. So children might be non-speaking all or some of the time, selective mutism, hard of hearing. English language learners doesn't technically constitute complex communication needs. However, I have popped it in there because many of our children who do have complex communication needs are also English language learners. So just that extra level of complexity for those children. Children may have complex communication needs due to a brain injury, a stroke, which is more common in children who are born prematurely. They may have auditory processing disorder, physical differences, delayed speech, echolalia, gestalt language processing, verbal dyspraxia. Their speech might just be very difficult to understand, and they might have any combination of these. So what is AAC? AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. Augmentative means to add to someone's speech, and alternative means to be used instead of speech. So Speech Pathology Australia defines AAC as when a person uses something other than speech to communicate. Often when we think of supporting children with complex communication needs, our minds go to visuals. Just have a think. You don't need to share, but just have a think of, what are some of the first kinds of visuals that come to your mind off the top of your head? For me, I think of sort of visual cue cards on lanyards that I see out in services, first and then charts, visual schedules, labels on furniture, and then also more complex communication systems, which we're going to be talking more in depth about today. I did share this Communication Bill of Rights during our last session, but I just wanted to touch on it again today. So this is the Communication Bill of Rights. It was developed in 1992 by the National Joint Committee for the Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities, which is based in the United States. So all children with complex communication needs have the right to express their feelings. So thinking about ways and opportunities that we can give them that voice to do that. They have the right to understand communications. So that, also impacts on how we're communicating with children. Are we using visuals? Are we using their communication system when we're communicating with them? They have the right to reject, very important. They have the right to say no and have that no respected. They have the right to request information. So thinking about how are we providing children with opportunities to do that. They have the right to access information and to be communicated with in a dignified manner. They have the right to aid, services and resources. So that's very important in what we're talking about today. They have the right to have access to their communication system at all times. They have the right to be listened to and for us to make opportunities to give them time to share their voice so that they can be listened to. The right to be included in social interaction. So how are we supporting our children to be included socially with other children, in play, at group times, all of those things? They have the right to learn about themselves, to learn about life, and to be offered choices. I'm just going to whip through Just a few of the more common forms of AAC before we get into communication systems. But something I did want to say before that, there are some key skills that it's really important for children to be learning, and this is something to talk to their speech pathologist, if they have one, hopefully they have one, talk to their speech pathologist about some more. But children really need a way to initiate communication, so to say that they have something to say. This might be raising their hand, it might be coming over with their communication device, it might be something like this, which is a wristband that are available to purchase on the internet that says, I have something to say, please get in my communication system. And a child might hold up the hand that has that wristband, or they might look at the wristband and then look at the adult and look back. So just chatting with their speech pathologist to find out what is the form of communication initiation that the speech pathologist is working on with that child and using that. Children also need to be working on a way to accept or reject. The most universally known form of this is nodding the head and shaking the head. From my conversations with speech pathologists, they say that's ideally what they'd like all children to be working towards, because it doesn't require any equipment. You don't need anyone to bring anything to you. You don't need anyone to, provide you with that opportunity. You can be, you have autonomy in nodding and shaking your head, and it's universally understood. We might also, we all use natural gesture. All of us use natural gesture as a way to add to our communication. Children with complex communication needs do this as well. Also, eye gaze, eye pointing. So if I'm looking at something, I'm thinking about it. Eye pointing is something that people might do if they're not able to point using their hand. So that's when they look at that person, they look at the thing they are talking about or they want, and then they look back. So it's pointing using the eyes. Vocalizations are also a form of common AAC that we use all the time. Different vocalizations add to what we're saying, whether that's laughter, grunting, squealing, that all adds information to how a person might be feeling about what they're doing or saying. Keyword sign is a form of AAC. However, I just want to add that Auslan is not a form of AAC. So Auslan is a language on its own, just like spoken English is. Keyword sign is when we might use words such as, that game is finished, or do you want more food? So we're just signing the keywords. We're not signing the whole sentence. Auslan is a separate language that has its own grammatical structure and grammatical rules. So it's quite different to keyword sign. But keyword sign is a common and, for a lot of children, helpful way to make themselves understood. Yes and no symbols. You may have seen these around before, and these might be used by children who are still learning how to nod and shake their head. With yes and no symbols, I do strongly recommend that you don't put faces on them. So we want children to know that it's okay to say no. So children with complex communication needs are at a higher risk of abuse and of being mistreated by other children because they're not able to verbally stand up for themselves or have a lot of difficulty explaining to an adult what's happened afterwards. So we really want to empower them to say no. No is often a very good word. Similarly, we don't want to teach them that they always have to do what an adult tells them to do. So yeah, strongly recommend if you're using yes, no symbols, don't have faces on them. There are lots of different symbols out there. Sometimes yes is a yellow cloud like this. Sometimes it's a green triangle. Sometimes it's a green tick. It doesn't really matter which one you use as long as it's consistent. So consistent across the environment and consistent across all the environments that the child's in. So this is a conversation to have with their speech pathologist. What is the speech pathologist using? What's being used at home? Use the same thing in the care setting as well. Visual flashcards. So these may just have some, again, like keywords on them that you might show to a child. I strongly recommend having them available for children to use as well, so they can pick them up and show them to adults or use them with other children and for peers to use to communicate with the child as well. When you're using flashcards, just do be aware of the clothing that you're wearing as well, and if it's an effective backdrop for flashcards. especially if the child you're supporting has a vision impairment. So vision impairment is quite common for children who have complex communication needs that arise from a brain injury. Another option can be having like a black board that you can put them on if that helps the child to see. Just a word on flashcards. So when I'm thinking about what words are commonly on lanyards with flashcards, often the words that I see out in services are finished, more, stop, food, drink, toilet, safe hands. But these are all quite directive about routines and more about things that adults want to say. So I really encourage you to think about what are children saying and what do children want to say. So having on your lanyard things like, can I play? My turn, look, what's your name? Let's pretend. And it's also really important to have one that says it's something else. Are we giving children an option to say it's none of these things, it's something else? Because that's really important, and it can be really, really frustrating for children when the options that they're given don't meet any of the things they want to say and they don't have a way to say that, and often that can lead to escalations in behaviours. More often than not, the visuals that we think of first are actually more aimed at getting children to follow adult instructions rather than supporting children to communicate. So just really question whose voice is heard, whose intentions and agenda are given importance, what do children want to say? So spending some time sitting out, in the learning spaces, listening to other children's conversations. What are they talking about? What's important to them and what's important to this child? What kinds of things do other children spend most of their time saying? Because it's not usually, I want more food, drink, I want the toilet, things like that. So we need to be looking at the play and social language that they're using and thinking how can we be providing that to our children with complex communication needs as well. Also very helpful for children who are learning English, who may not have complex communication needs, but a lot of these strategies are really helpful just for creating an inclusive communication environment for everyone. So effective communication is not adults just using visuals to express themselves. Visuals should mostly be used in the environment for children to express themselves, not only by adults, not only to adults, but more importantly to other children as well. So when looking at a visual communication support, ask yourself whose communication does this serve? Just some other examples of AAC here. We have choice boards, which you may have seen out before. These are often made by speech pathologists or OTs so that children have a different selection of activities and they can make choices about what they do. First then charts would also fit under this. So, first toilet, then Lego or whatever it is, so that children know what's happening next or what they need to do first before they can do something else. Next to this picture is another picture of what's called an aided language display. These are also called chat boards, and these are made by speech pathologists. So they can be general or topic specific. So this example here looks like it's a mealtime one. It's got words like eat, yummy, yucky, drink, food. So you point to words and you can communicate about that topic. So this one, for instance, might be on the tables at mealtime. There might be a different one related to sandpit play in the sandpit. There might be one related to animals if you always have animals set up, or a Lego one. So they're really helpful for children who don't yet have their own communication system and need some extra supports in the environment. So it really promotes that social conversation and gives them different words to use when they're playing with other children. If you are supporting children who have selective mutism, these supports are also really, really helpful for children who are young, who might be in the early childhood setting, who aren't yet able to read and write. And for older children in an OSH setting, for example, who can read and write, a whiteboard that they can write on can be most helpful for them. This is an example of a aided language display that I saw out at a playground recently. So you can see that it's arranged in columns. So this type is based off of a communication system called POD. And these aided language displays are popping up around the place. They are created by a speech pathology clinic called Two Way Street, which is based in Adelaide. All that Two Way Street does is they focus on AAC. So they are working with local councils, the zoo, the art gallery, places like that to make communication more accessible to people with complex communication needs. So we can see that on the left-hand side, it has words you might want to start your sentence with. So what, or I, or you. And what you do basically is you go down the columns and you collect words. So you might say in the first column, I, second column, go, and then second to last column, trampoline. I go trampoline. And that's your sentence. So you point to a word, you say it, you touch a word, you say it. Or a child who is non-speaking would just point to the words or say yes or no. That's the one. Generally, speech pathologists will recommend modelling 1 to 2 more words than the child is using. But as I said, please do check this with the child's speech pathologist. All my advice is just general in nature. For a communication system like this, you don't need to model entire sentences. Often people feel really overwhelmed, like, oh, I have to find every single word, like and isn't on there and the isn't on there. This is for keywords, modeling of keywords only. So you can just say slide. Oh, let's go to the slide. Or you might say I slide or slide finished. So you might just be modeling 1, 2, 3, or 4 words, depending on what you want to say and what level your communicator, your child is up to. Really important to let the person finish their message. And down at the bottom right, you'll see a little square that says it's something else, please get my communication device. So as we spoke about, really important to give people the option to say, actually, it's none of these things, it's something else. So we need to make sure that a person's finished their message because, they might have wanted to say, slide, help you. I want to help you on the slide. I want to push you. But if we stop them when they point to slide, their first word, all we've allowed them to say is slide. We need to make sure we've given them time to put together all the words they want, and then they've given us some indication that they're finished. So either they've looked at us and paused for our response, or we check with them, have you finished your message? And they might say yes or no. This is another example. This one's called a core communication board for children who use a communication system called Proloquo2Go. So this might look familiar to people if you have someone who uses an iPad to communicate. This is like a paper-based printout. I have seen this in a few school playgrounds around the place as well. Very similar, different layout. This one's got more words on it and more of those little words. So like he, she, for, to. And down the bottom, you'll see that the squares look different. They have a little tab on them. That means that this one actually takes you to a folder of more words. So if I, point it to the food folder on the iPad, that would take you to a whole folder with all food-related words. If you're using it as a core communication board that's a printout, that is a limitation of this format. However, on the other side, this is a double-sided resource. On the other side, it does have a square that says get my communication device so that a person could expand on it. But yeah, as you're touching things, you say the name of what you're touching so that the child knows what you're saying, and that includes folders. So I would say food when I click on food. Even if I'm saying I want sandwich, I'm going to say I want food sandwich when I get into that folder, because that tells the child the pathway they need to take to be able to find those words. If we just say I want sandwich and they're thinking, oh, how did you find sandwich? How do I find that word when I want to use it? So it's important to share those navigational words as well, and the child's speech pathologist can talk to you more about doing that with their system. So some examples of AAC are communication systems. This one's called Proloquo2Go. It is available on iPad. So Proloquo to Go was invented with autistic children in mind. So that affected the choice of the layout and also that it's only available on iPad. Words are arranged more in a, I suppose, English grammatically correct order and grouped according to like pronouns, verbs, nouns, all those sorts of things. This is a pod. So this one is called a paper-based pod. It's a book and pod works the same as Proloquo to Go. However, it was developed with children with cerebral palsy in mind. So children who have a physical disability as well as complex communication needs. So pod is designed with efficiency, physical efficiency as the main point, so that it takes the least amount of energy to say what you want. So the most commonly used words are going to be on the left-hand side. Also, Proloquo to Go, as I said, is sort of arranged more around English grammatical language. So you scan Proloquo to Go rows from left to right. So if I'm looking at the top row here on this communication system, I can say I can, and then I'm going to go to the next one, go, whatever. So I'm scanning across, I'm choosing my words, and then I'm going down, choosing my next words to make my whole sentence if I was going to communicate an entire sentence. For pod, it goes down in columns. So the words that you're going to want to say the most are going to be in columns. So I've just popped up on the screen the pod iPad version. So pod is available as a book and also on iPad. The iPad goes down in columns too. So you can see I is in the second column, and then you might go to the fourth column over, want, I, want. So you can see I'm building it column by column. That's because for people who need to rely on saying yes, no, this is the most efficient way to organize language without going into all of the complexity of how it was developed. So there are two different systems. They in some ways look similar, in some ways they look really different, and that's because they were developed from two different roots for the needs of two different types of children. But anyone could have either of those systems. The other type of communication system is a word speech output device. So this is for children who can read, write, spell, and they type out what they want to say and then press speak. So this is what all or most children are ideally working towards. The problem with the other systems is you're limited by what words are already in your communication system. You can't have every single word in there because it would just be too big, it would be too hard to navigate, and especially for the book pod type, it would be just far too heavy. It's impossible. Once you can read, write, and spell, you can use a speech output device like this, and then the world is your oyster. You can say whatever you want. So when you are using a book type communication system, as I said, you say the word as you point to it. If you are using an iPad type, as you touch the words, they will appear in the top window up there. Some iPads are set to speak the word as you touch it, as well as putting it up in that window. Some of them won't speak it until you touch the communication window. So it just depends on the child's setting. But for any of them, once you touch that window, it will speak the whole word or phrase that you've selected. If a child has put a message in there and you then want to reply, just check with them if it's okay for you to clear their message first. That's just like a general courtesy protocol. We don't want to just be deleting children's words that they've just spent 10 minutes putting in there. So just check with them first if that's okay. Is it okay if I clear your message so I can write a message as well? Some communication systems have the option to have two speakers going at once. So just speak to your child's speech pathologist about if that's an option for their system. This is usually called chat mode. Something I did want to talk about is wordplay and babbling. So all of us babble when we are learning to speak and communicate, and using AAC systems is no different. So children also babble with AAC systems, and this can look like just pressing words repeatedly over and over and over and over. So it might be, milk, 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 milk. It could just be any word like over, and it might not make sense contextually. That's just part of them exploring the communication system. How does it work? How does it sound? Finding that joy in, exploring the system. Often children will laugh or squeal as they're doing these things as well. It's really important that they go through this stage and that we honour that stage, just like we would honour that for any other children who are learning to speak verbally. Children who don't have complex communication needs sometimes say things that make no sense. So, you might say to a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, when I grow up, I want to be a wolf. And we just go, oh, that's an odd thing to say. But when it's a child who uses AAC, if we say to them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say wolf, often our first, I suppose our automatic response is to think, oh, they don't know how to use this system. Rather than maybe they do know how to use it and they're just saying they want to be a wolf when they grow up, and that's just, one of those funny things that children sometimes say. So also just attribute meaning is something that I'd strongly recommend. Attribute meaning to whatever the child says. So for example, if they're looking at plastic animals and they pick up a gorilla and they press horse, educators could say, yeah, it does look a bit like a horse, doesn't it? I think it might be a gorilla, and log that on the system. If the child was babbling and repeating bird, 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 bird on the system and laughing, educators could laugh and say, oh, that sounds so funny, doesn't it? Bird, 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 birds everywhere. Imagine if they were all in here. Just like we would attribute meaning to the attempts to communicate verbally by young children who are learning to speak. So a child might be at all different stages with their communication. They might be just learning to communicate one word. They might be at the stage of communicating whole sentences. So just chat to their family and their speech pathologist about what sort of level they're at. The idea there's an idea that children need to progress from simple communication systems like choice boards and flashcards before they can move on to complex systems like this. The advice I've had from speech pathologists that I've worked with is that this is a very outdated view that's not supported by current research. So the current research tells us that children can start with complex systems like this right from the very start, right from infancy, if it's already known that they're going to have communication needs, just like we start children who are going to speak verbally off with the whole range of verbal words and language. So yeah, that's, if you might come across that sort of thought, just chat to the child speech pathologist about that, because that's not the advice that I've had that's best practice anymore. The current recommendation is that children should get their communication system as early as possible. If you are using a communication system with a child, I recommend you keep a list of words you can't find or words that you'd like added to the dice. And this gives the family or the speech pathologist an idea of what words need to be added. It's important to make sure that relevant words are in there. So favourite foods, educator names, activities, best friends, names of pets, favourite characters or TV shows, so that they have those things to talk about. I also recommend that educators spend some time just looking through the system to learn where words are. So my personal opinion is that it is okay for educators to take that system with them during a programming session so that they can spend that time to sit down and learn where the words are. Ideally, we do want that system to always be with the child. However, not having it for a couple of hours and then having educators more confident in using it for the whole rest of the time is of greater benefit than the child having it all the time but no one feels confident to use it. But if educators are going to be taking the system with them for a little while, they should let the child know and explain to the child why they want to borrow it. So, hey Tom, I'm going to be doing some of my work in the office. I would really like some time to just sit and look at your communication system so that I can learn where the words are, because I think I need a little bit more practice. Would it be okay if I take this to the office with me for a little while, and then I'll bring it straight back when I'm finished after lunch? Would that be okay? So explain why you want it. Let the child know that they'll bring it back soon. If the child says no, we do need to respect that. The device does belong to them, so we need to respect that and find some other ways. But mostly, in my experience, children are normally really excited that you want to learn it, so they're normally happy for you to borrow it for a while. While educators are learning, they could keep a notepad in their back pocket as well, to record where certain words and phrases are located on the system so they can find them easier next time. I found this really helpful when I was learning to use communication systems. Some of the words aren't in places where you'd automatically think of them. So, for instance, I was visiting a service recently with a child who uses an iPad with Proloquo to go on it. And I was looking for wash hands. Where is wash hands? And I found it in a subcategory of the things folder. So I had to go through things and then go through another category and then another category, and then I found it. So some of them aren't in places where you might think of them straight away. So if there are words and phrases that you're wanting to say quite regularly and they're a bit tricky to find, I recommend just noting that down, keeping it a little note in your back pocket or somewhere in the room so you can just jot your memory. Oh, that's right, that's how I find that word. Most people use more than one type of AAC, which is called multimodal communication. And we all do this too. So we use our vocalizations, our eye gaze, our gestures. We might use signs sometimes. And this is the same for children with complex communication needs. So just because they have a communication system like this doesn't mean that they might not also use a first then chart or a visual schedule or yes no symbols or something like that as well. So you can't learn what's not modeled to you, and it has to be modeled a lot. So for a child who is going to use spoken language, their input is in spoken language, we speak to them, and their output is spoken language. They learn to speak. So this is the path of development for most children that we know. For children who have complex communication needs, if we are only speaking to them in verbal language and then giving them their communication device to talk back to us, that's like speaking to someone in English and expecting them to reply in Japanese. You can't speak Japanese unless people are speaking Japanese to you so that you can learn the words. So we need to be making sure that we are modeling communication on the child's device as often as possible. So for children who are going to be verbal communicators, they get their language in, language out. There's a range, as we know, a range of normal of when children start to speak. Some children start to speak, around 1. Some children might not be, there might be 2 before they really start speaking. So if we take as an average 18 months as when sort of verbal communication typically takes off, we see it increase from a couple of words to, quite a few words quite suddenly. That takeoff has taken 18 months of that child hearing spoken language all day, every day, before they start really speaking themselves. For those children who are 18 months old, the research tells us they have received 4,380 hours of spoken language input before they start to speak. For children who are using visual communication systems, AAC systems, they might have a 1-hour speech pathology session a week. That would be good. Some of them only have 1 hour a fortnight. If they only have a 1-hour speech pathology session a week and we're relying on that time with the speech pathologist to provide them with most of their modelling across the week of their system, and that 1-hour speech pathology session a week is giving this input, how long do you think it would take for children to gain the same amount of AAC input as a child who is getting verbal input? Would anyone like to just pop in the chat box a guess? Give you a couple of seconds. how long would it take for them to get that same amount of modelling before they have had that same number of hours to be able to communicate using their AAC system? I see some people are typing. No takers?
5 years.
5 years, someone says.
7.
7 is actually 84 years. So it would actually take those children 84 years to get that same amount of input if we only focus on their time with the speech pathologist. We don't have 84 years, so we need to have as much modelling as often as possible. We're never going to be able to make up that gap. It's just an unfortunate truth that children who speak verbally are going to have a lot more verbal language modelled to them than we can ever model to children who use AAC systems. So we just need to try our hardest to do as much as we can. So what we do want is aided language in so that children can get aided language out. So that might be using the AAC system. If they, are deaf or hard of hearing, it might be Auslan. However children are going to communicate, they need to be getting that in as much as possible. Early, often, rich, and for real purposes. The sooner the better. Children need to be supported with visuals as soon as possible, as young as possible, and as much as possible. Yeah, maybe they will just start talking when they're 4. Maybe they won't. And those crucial early years of brain development and the sensitive period for language and communication will have been missed if we wait until they're 4, 5, 6 before we start implementing these supports in their environment. So as early as possible. Has anyone in an early childhood setting ever thought of using visuals in a nursery age room? Because they're really helpful for babies and toddlers. Babies have a lot to say if you give them the means. So visuals and keyword sign are really great strategies to use in general in infant and toddler rooms. Children love it. It decreases their frustration levels and it supports their speech development. And it also provides an early support for those children who will later end up having delayed language or complex communication needs. So they've already had that foundational support before we even identified that. The research also tells us that AAC use actually supports speech development. So some people are worried, if I only use this system or if we use too many visuals, children won't learn to speak. The research tells us the more we use visuals, actually, the easier it is for children to learn to communicate verbally. So talking is the most efficient way to get your message across. If children can talk, they will. And if they're not talking, it's because they can't. And we need to give them other robust methods to communicate. The child's AAC system is their voice. It needs to be respected and treated as such. It needs to be always available. Is it available? Is it charged? My tip is keep a charger at the centre. Sometimes parents forget to bring the charger in. Sometimes the device comes in on 10%. Is the communication system spoken about by educators with kindness? Or do children hear educators saying it's too hard, it's too complicated, it's an inconvenience, or they don't believe the child can learn to use it? Is the communication system physically treated with respect? Is it handled with respect by adults? The communication device is an extension of the child. How they hear it talked about and handled will impact on their view of themselves. When children are not given constant access to the AAC system, we're effectively putting tape over their mouth and deciding when they are and aren't allowed to speak. So just think back to that Communication Bill of Rights. Are we ensuring that children's rights are being met all of the time? I am going to fly through a few of these slides because we are almost out of time, but I want this to become your mantra. See me, see my AAC. So if the communication system is the child's voice, it needs to be wherever they are, at the table, in the bathroom, next to them, outside. Ideally, we want children to eventually be responsible for having it with them, but at the start, adults will need to ensure that the child is with the child and it's independently accessible to them, so not up on a shelf. This also creates a good reminder to adults to use the AAC system. When the system is always with the child, while they're doing a range of things throughout the day, this opens up lots more opportunities of things that adults can be modelling about. A good way to get children to start taking responsibility for their own device is giving it to them and asking them to take it outside with them, and this teaches them to bring it with them. So, model a range of language. We just talked about the importance of modelling. Here's some examples of language that could be modelled. In these examples, I've underlined words that I would be pointing to or selecting in the child's communication device. So we need to be modelling more than just time to eat, time to the toilet. We need to be modelling activities that the child, educators and others are doing. Modelling opinions. Oh, I think that's funny. Or, you look like you're saying, I think it's boring. Modelling feelings. Oh, look, so-and-so is sad. Or it looks like you're really excited. Social language. Can I play? What's your name? My turn. Modelling jokes. We need to avoid assumptions. So when modelling communication about feelings or opinions, I recommend using the language it looks like. It looks like you're feeling worried rather than, oh, you're worried. Or I think you're saying this is bad rather than it's bad. We don't know what a person is thinking or feeling, but we can say what it looks like they're feeling or what we think they might be feeling and model that word. And hopefully this will give the child the learning to then know how to access that word themselves when they need it. And this way you can model the language without putting words in the child's mouth. Look for the magic moments. When a child is excited or upset or coming to an educator because they want something, or when they've just got that look in their eye and you know they're thinking something, say, it looks like you've got something to say. Hold the communication device out to them, give an expectant pause, and processing time. So some children need a processing time, mental processing time, of up to 20 seconds. So hold the device out, count to 10 in your head, shrug to show it's your turn, like I'm waiting for a response. Count to 10 in your head again, ask again, do you have something to say? Count to 5 in your head, and then model. So again, count to 10, shrug, another 10, repeat your question, count to 5, and then model. This gives children lots of time to process what they need to do, what they're being asked and what they need to do. It gives the child an opportunity to say something before an educator models. For some children, the idea that they can have a say or express an opinion may be really new to them. They may not have had much experience of that before, so they might require quite a bit of processing time to begin with, as they're also thinking about what you're expecting them to do. Like, oh, they've asked me my opinion. Can I give an opinion? What is my opinion? Maybe that hasn't really been asked of them before. Don't give up. Keep giving them lots of opportunities to practice. Don't be afraid of doing it wrong. Remember that any modelling is better than no modelling. When we think of that 84 years, to close that gap, any modelling is better than no modelling. So just try. It doesn't matter if you do it wrong. It's okay. The child is still getting input in the way that we want output. They're still getting some of those words modelled, even if our technique, or our pathway might not be the one that the speech pathologist would use. It's definitely better than nothing. What about other children? So have moments of explicit teaching. Talk about disabilities, okay. It's okay to openly talk with children about disability and to answer their questions honestly. We just have to ensure that we're being respectful when we do so. We want children to grow up to be inclusive and understanding of others, and this means removing stigma and shame associated with disability. Silence leads to misunderstanding, which leads to prejudice, and I think a lot of people are afraid of having conversations about disability with children who don't have disabilities because they're worried about saying the wrong thing. Silence is worse than just having a go. So I recommend, explaining that some people, if a child has a question, why can't they talk, or why do they have that? Explain that some people have difficulty talking, but that they still understand what other people say and they still have ideas in their mind of what they want to say. I recommend talking with the family of the child who uses the AAC system. Find out what language the family use to talk about the AAC system. Do they call it an iPad, a pod, a talker, a device, a book, something else? Find out what word they use. Just chat to them about, some other children have been asking questions. How would you like us to answer these questions? Involve the child in these conversations as well. Ask them if they would like to share about their AAC system at a group time. So invite them to be part of that conversation. Maybe an educator explains how it works while the child shows it. Often children like to demonstrate the use of their system to other children, and they like to experience that feeling of being the expert in something that other children aren't. But make sure this has been planned and discussed with the child and family beforehand. And also let the child know they have the right to refuse if they want to. If they say, actually, no, I don't want you to talk about my system at group time, even if we think that would be really helpful, we need to respect that child's voice and their opinions and respect their no. If other children, I find pick up how to use AAC systems very quickly, and they pick it up even quicker when they see adults using the system. They also learn their attitudes about the child, the AAC system, and just disability in general by watching adult behaviour. So thinking about, those things. Are we showing respect? Are we giving opportunities? Are we attributing meaning? However, children should not be... I forgot to click the screen. Children should not be taking the AAC system off with them, away from the child to play with it. This is something that happens with iPads particularly. If they do this, explain to them that the AAC system is like the child's voice and it needs to be with them so that they can use it. Then use this as an opportunity to teach and support them to use the device to talk with the child. So encourage other children to model on the AAC system when talking with the child. Also, young children especially often think that if another child is non-speaking, then they must be a baby. So just address this misinformation and explain that the child is the same age and that some people just have difficulty speaking. Older children might also assume that a child who's non-speaking has an intellectual disability. Sometimes this is the case, but often it's not. Often the person might have complex communication needs but no intellectual disability. So older children need to know that, and they also need to know that the child can still understand everything that's said to them and they have interests and enjoy social interactions and connection just like everyone else. So my key tips, my key takeaways are work closely with speech pathologists. They are the experts in this area. They're best placed to advise you on supporting children. Ask families if they're okay with you reaching out to their child's speech pathologist, or if they're happy for the speech pathologist to come to the service and do a few sessions with educators to teach them how the communication system works. If you're at an OSH service, develop relationships with school teachers. For OSHs, talk to the teachers, see what strategies they're using in class, particularly if the child is in a special class or disability unit. Don't reinvent the wheel. If there's already a visual schedule or a first then chart being used, ask for the template. Consistency is key, so if it's being used in class and at OSH, that's ideal. The teacher's also likely to have had those conversations with the speech pathologist and the family as part of developing those learning plans. See me, see my device. Make that your mantra. Talk to speech pathologists about children having a way to initiate and a way to accept and reject and what's going to be best for that child. Give children a way to say it's something else or get my communication device. Put words onto what children are doing. So, you're playing the sandpit, up, you're building up, crash. The same as we would be talking to young children who are learning verbal language. Avoid testing. So no, show me red, show me purple. The communication device is not a testing tool like that. That's not real and rich communication. And avoid say after me. So not, dog, now you touch dog. Again, that's not the purpose of true communication. Modelling should be real and it should be for real communications. Provide that processing time, that expectant pause, so that children know they do have the opportunity to speak. Think about, is it child focused? Is it useful? And remembering it looks like you've got something to say, or do you have something to say? We can't be honouring children's voices and including their voices in programming and the social environment when we're not giving them a voice. So we need to stop viewing giving children a voice as the icing on the cake of an inclusive environment, but see it as a fundamental ingredient of the cake. It is crucial. The icing on the top is educators doing hard things well. And here's just a little meme that I made for my classroom many years ago. If only Ariel had her communication system, it would have avoided a lot of drama. So thinking back about our Communication Bill of Rights, making sure that children are having their rights respected. And now it's up to you. If not you, then who? If not now, then when? So that brings us to the end of today's session. A reminder that today's session has been recorded and will be available on the Inclusion Agency's website to watch again. We'll also be sending out a short follow-up survey and would love to hear your feedback on today's session. Thank you.